Hello everyone, welcome back to the Budget Sportsman. Thank you so much for joining me on today's video. Today I've got a couple of budget rangefinders from TideWe that I want to show you. And to be honest with you, one of these is my new favorite budget rangefinder and probably the first budget rangefinder that I've ever felt really comfortable recommending to the average hunter who needs angle compensation. So before we dive into these two rangefinders, I do want to give you just a brief backstory. You see, over the last couple of years, I've made multiple videos comparing different budget rangefinders, and I've always walked away from those videos feeling very disappointed that I didn't have something that I could really just fully recommend to my viewers, especially if you need angle compensation. I checked out some that were pretty good but had no angle compensation. I checked out some that had angle compensation but they didn't work well, or maybe they were really bulky in the hands. And on my last video, I had a lot of comments recommending that I check out TideWe rangefinders. And actually not long after that, TideWe actually reached out to me and asked me if I would review some of their products. And so I said sure, and the first thing that I requested was these rangefinders. So I'm really excited to show them to you today. I've got two different ones here at two different price points and a little bit different feature set, but really quite similar. The one on my right here is the HD-700E. And this one's gonna come in at $140. This one over here is the HR-F700, and this one's gonna come in at $80. Keep in mind, I've got a discount code for you. It's called TBS18. TBS stands for the Budget Sportsman, so you go to TideWe's website where it says promo code or coupon code, you put in TBS18, and that's gonna get you 18% off. That means this $140 rangefinder is down to $115, and this $80 rangefinder is down to $65 approximately. So before I jump into the specifics of each rangefinder, let's talk about the similarities of both and the things that they both have so that we don't have to say it twice. Both of these rangefinders do have angle compensation. Both of them do have a scan mode where you can hold down the button and move it around, and it will give you a consistent reading as you move around, or a constant updating reading as you move around. Both of them do have a speed mode, which, to be honest with you, I never use, doesn't mean anything to me. I'm not really going to address it in this video, but be aware they do both have a speed mode. Both of them do have an internal battery that can be recharged via the USB-C cable that's included, and both of them do include a lanyard, which I don't have on either of them today. So now let's dive into each of them. And I'll start with this more expensive HD-700E, and we'll talk about some of the things that make each one a little bit unique. On the HD-700E, you're going to find that you get a really nice, I don't want to call it quite hard shell case. It's not completely hard, but it is very stiff and very rigid. You've got this magnetic flap at the top here, and you can pull the zippers down. Now, the idea here is that this does not open all the way. It just kind of flops open, and there's some elastic on the inside here that keeps it open. So I think the idea is that you'll be able to take your rangefinder out, drop it in, and instead of zipping it up, especially in a hunting situation where that sound may be a problem, you can just kind of fold it closed and put the magnet down. And that magnet is quite strong. I wouldn't have any worries about that coming out. Now, one thing to be aware of is that this rangefinder is a little bit larger than the other one that I'm going to show you in a minute, and the case itself is a good bit larger as well. So the overall package is a little bit bulkier. Now, let's get rid of the case, pull it out of the package, and you're going to see you get a nice camouflage design with some nice black rubberized texture. Like both of them, they both have a power button here and a mode button here, really where I would want it. My pointer finger's on that power range button, and both of them have that just right where I'd want it. Both of them have a eyepiece here that does help you to focus, and both of them are stiff enough where they're not going to move around, unlike some other rangefinders where that's been a problem before. Now, one thing about the HD-700E is that it actually comes with more modes than the HR-F700. This includes some modes that would be useful for golfing. Now, I'm not really going to address them because I'm not a golfer and this isn't a golfing YouTube channel. But one thing that I appreciate is that they put a switch right here under the eyepiece where you can actually flip it to the right, and it actually eliminates those golfing modes, so you have less modes to cycle through. If you happen to need them, maybe you're a golfer and a hunter and you want to flip back and forth, you can actually do that. You flip it to the left and you get all the modes at once. You flip it to the right and it eliminates the golfing modes and gives you pretty much just the basic modes that you would want as a hunter. Now, really the key feature of the HD-700E here is that it has a red and green readout inside. The reticle and the text are all red and green. Now, I was really excited about that for this reason. If you've ever hunted those early morning and late evening hours when the light is getting dim, you've probably had the experience where you had a hard time reading your rangefinder. I know for myself, a lot of times the first thing I do when I get in a new stand especially is start ranging trees so I know some distances, and if a deer comes in quick, I got a good idea of the range. And often I've tried to range a tree and I just can't read my rangefinder, so I'm ranging it and then I'm like pointing to the sky to try to get a little bit of light to read that rangefinder. With this one, you're not gonna have that problem. You got a really nice bright, and actually the brightness is adjustable, so you can adjust it so it's not blowing your eyes out in those dim conditions, but you can also raise the brightness when the light gets brighter. But you're never gonna have that problem in those low light conditions. The flip side of that is I was a little disappointed that in really bright conditions, this does become hard to read. I took this out to a 3D course the other day, and I was shooting some 3D with a friend. We were shooting about noon, and we were under timber, and I could read it, but it was starting to get a little bit harder to read. But if I turned around and ranged out into a field, it became almost impossible to read this rangefinder. So you're gonna have to make a decision on this one, whether it's more important to you to be able to read those really low light conditions easily and well, or whether you really need that ability to read the bright conditions. If you're hunting out west, maybe out over open country, sagebrush, all that kind of stuff, this is probably not the right rangefinder for you. If you mostly hunt timber, it might be right for you. Just be aware that if you get into a really bright situation, it may become a little hard to read. Now let's move on to the cheaper HRF-700. And you can see this one comes with a much more basic carry case. Again, both of them have a belt loop. I didn't mention that in the other one, but they do have a belt loop here. This one is just magnetic. That's it. There's no zipper. It's just magnetic. But it's a softer case, and it's much more compact. And I actually kind of prefer this case because this is something I feel like I would actually use. The other one is a little bit bulky, and I'd probably end up leaving it at home. You pull the rangefinder out, and what I'm going to do here for a minute, again, you get the nice camo with a nice rubberized coating here for all of the black areas. But I just wanted to pull this out for a minute and kind of compare the size. You can see that the HRF-700 is a good bit smaller, a little bit shorter. It's a little bit thinner this way and a little bit smaller in this dimension. Just overall a little bit smaller. And again, I actually prefer this. It fits in my hand really nice, just kind of just falls right in there, slips in a pocket really well. And overall, as far as size, I kind of prefer this rangefinder. Now, I don't have a lot to say about this because really, I've said it all. It has angle compensation, it has a regular line of sight mode, it has speed mode, which I'm not gonna use. It has a scan mode, it has a rechargeable battery, it has the adjustable eyepiece here that's good and stiff. And this rangefinder has everything that I, as a bow hunter, have been looking for in a rangefinder for $65. The main difference between this rangefinder and the one we just looked at is that this does not have the illuminated reticle inside. This is a black reticle, and it does not have the switch to turn off the golfing modes, but that just means it doesn't have the golfing modes, which for me, I feel like I'm not paying for features I'm not going to use. Now there is one big drawback for both of these rangefinders, and that is as you cycle through the various modes and you look at the readouts in those modes, it can be a little bit confusing about which mode you're on or what the readout for those modes mean. I went to the owner's manuals for both of them, and they both show the exact same settings and the same readouts. But what I found in comparing them to each other and comparing them to my old rangefinder is that these actually don't work exactly the same way, even though the manuals seem to imply that they do. So what I want to do at this point is I want to actually take some pictures. They're not going to look great. I'm going to use my cell phone and try to take a picture through the rangefinder, but show you the different modes and show you what those numbers mean for each model so that if you get one of these, you're not confused. All right, so let's dive into the different modes, starting with the HD-700E. And this is, of course, the more expensive rangefinder that has the red and green display. I did want to mention here, I've mentioned red and green all throughout the video, but here you're only seeing red, but you will see green under certain settings or in certain modes. Now, here you're seeing the line of sight mode, and that's indicated by the S on the left side of the screen. Line of sight simply means it's measuring the exact distance from your rangefinder in a straight line to the object that you're ranging. Here, that number is 29.3. The confusing part about this is this display looks a lot like what you would get for an angle compensated mode on many rangefinders. You get a range there in yards, and then you get a number or degree of angle, and then you get a number and distance, which normally would be your angle compensated distance. In this case, it is not, and I think that's obvious by the fact that it's giving you a number of 3 yards. The 3 yards is actually a vertical distance that it's reading. So in other words, it's taking the distance and the angle and then calculating how high up the object is that you're ranging. So in this case, it's 3 yards or about 9 feet up. Higher than my eye, higher than the rangefinder is the object that I'm ranging. I don't see a real practical use for that number in most hunting situations, but just be aware of what it is, because if you don't know and you're not paying attention, it could look like you're in an angle compensated mode. Now this mode here is your angle compensated mode. Now it looks a lot different than what I would expect to see for an angle compensated mode, but after comparing it to other rangefinders and doing a lot of testing, this is your angle compensated mode. Now, what you don't get here is you don't get a line of sight and then a degree in angles and then a compensated number. That's not what you're getting. What you're getting, the 29, is your already compensated angle compensation mode number. That's what you have. The 2.1 is the same as the first mode we had, which is your vertical distance. How high up above or below your rangefinder is the object that you're ranging. So again, this looks a lot different, but once you know what it is, this is your angle compensated number. Now, I really prefer a rangefinder that shows the line of sight and the angle compensation in the same screen. That way, I just have confidence that it's doing its job and I know which number is which. But just recognize that this number is your angle compensated mode. So let's go on to the HRF-700. You can see the black display here. And once again, over on the right side of the screen, you see the S. Now, this is pretty much the same exact mode as the S mode in the HD-700E. However, it's just laid out a little bit differently. Way at the top of the screen there, you do get your line of sight, direct line from your rangefinder to the tree. That's that number, 28.6. Again, down at the bottom, you get a yardage. In this case, it says 0 because I'm not really ranging a whole lot above my head. But if I was, this would be a vertical distance. How high above me is the object that I'm ranging. And here you can see it's a 0.2 angle, which is why I'm not really getting a readout for the yardage, the vertical yardage there. So this is, again, just your line of sight mode. Now, when we move on to the angle compensated mode for the HRF-700, I actually like it better than on the HD-700E, and here's why. You're going to see up at the top your line of sight number, 29.5. Now, unfortunately, it does not give you the angle again in this mode, but what it does give you is an angle compensated number. So you get 29.5 at the top. That is your line of sight distance, and at the bottom you get 29.3, which is your angle compensated distance. So again, I actually prefer the readout here on the HRF-700 in that it gives me both numbers, and it just helps me remember and know that I'm in angle compensated mode and know which number I should be using. All right, so now that we've talked about both these rangefinders, compared them a little bit, and talked about all the features and the readouts inside the rangefinders, I want to give you some of my final conclusions. Overall, the HD-700E here, the more expensive one, is a great rangefinder. If you need golfing modes on your rangefinder, then this might be right for you. However, that bright readout, I think, could be a little bit difficult to actually use on an open golf course. Now, if you hunt primarily in the timber and you're not too worried about reading this in super bright conditions, this might be right for you because that reticle is super handy in low light conditions. Overall, for me, I was a little bit disappointed in how difficult it was to read once that light got brighter, especially those midday hours, especially if you're out in open timber. And so for me, this was a little disappointing. And to be honest with you, I don't need the golfing modes, and you're really at that point only paying for the red and green readout, which again, to me, might be great for you, but to me was a little disappointing. So that leaves me with the F700, and this rangefinder with the black readout and the compact size and having every feature that I want: regular line of sight mode, angle compensation mode, scan mode. It just does everything that I, as a bow hunter, primarily a bow hunter, but some rifle hunting, it does everything that I want it to do in a compact size with a carry case and a rechargeable battery for $65 if you use my coupon code. That is probably the cheapest rangefinder that I've ever reviewed on this channel, and yet it still comes out as probably my favorite budget rangefinder and the first budget rangefinder that I really feel like I can recommend to you if you need angle compensation mode. So yeah, I'm impressed. Again, the only real drawback for me is that those modes are a little bit confusing, but once you figure them out, go back and watch the video if you need to. I feel like this is a great option for the average bow hunter. All right, so let me know what you think of these rangefinders and this video down in the comments. By the way, go over to TideWe's website. I believe that code TBS18 is going to work for just about anything on the website. So go over there, see what else they have to offer. And until next time, remember to get off YouTube and get outdoors into God's great creation.